Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Could I have your attention, please? Thank you. I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this, our September Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. There's a Republican presidential debate tonight, which will not be interrupted by a congressional address. Um, a lot of people have asked me who I am supporting for the Republican presidential nomination. And of course, the Leadership Institute is a nonpartisan educational foundation and does not support or oppose candidates or political parties. Um, However, I can say that I have not yet personally decided who I am going to support for the nomination, but I think I would share with you my criterion, and it is this. I'm looking for candidates whom I am confident will do more for conservative principles than they think they absolutely have to do. Uh, I have had a sufficiency of self-proclaimed conservatives who, when they get in office, have to be argued, begged, or pressured into doing the right thing. So if that's of any use to you, you have that opinion this morning. In 2011, the Leadership Institute has already trained 7,838 students, and since its founding in 1979, the Institute has trained over 98,489 people. We're pushing close to the 100,000 mark. You have before you the Institute school schedule of currently scheduled schools for 2011. I urge you to take a moment to review our upcoming schools and consider attending one or sending a friend to one of our programs. Um, we have instituted a regular schedule now for our 2 week-long schools, our campaign management school and our future candidate school. We've held them repeatedly every year for some years, but now it's a systematic process. And we hold the campaign management school the first full week of 1 month, and the future candidate school the first full week of the next month, and so forth. And these schools are increasingly popular as more and more conservatives conclude that they owe it to their philosophy to study how to win. Now my pleasure to introduce to you Rachel Phillips, who will offer an invocation and lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance. Rachel is the Director of Communications Training for us here at the Institute. She is a graduate of Hillsdale College and holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Marketing Management. Rachel?
Thank you, Morton. Please join me in prayer. Father, thank you for bringing us together safely this morning, for the fellowship we've enjoyed as a result. I pray that you bless each person here today and that we seek to glorify you always. What we know not teach us, what we have not give us, and what we are not make us. In your Son's most holy and precious name I pray. Amen. And please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Rachel. And now I present to you Tyler Foote, who will give us a brief report on Leadership Institute's programs. Tyler is the Director of Political and New Media Training. He manages the Institute's campaign, political, legislative, and career schools. Prior to working here. Tyler worked as the assistant to the candidate on Trey Grayson's U.S. Senate campaign in Kentucky. Step forward, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Morton, and good morning, everyone. I wanted to take a moment and actually reiterate the announcement that Morton just made about our campaign trainings being offered the first full week of every month. Last year, LI trained over 250 conservative activists at our campaign trainings, and it's not uncommon for us to receive correspondence from past graduates crediting LI with their success stories. Such is the case of South Carolina State Representative Bill Taylor. Mr. Taylor attended our campaign training in late 2009 and went on to defeat an 8-year incumbent with 57% of the vote. Mr. Taylor has this to say about LI's campaign training. It's essential to be as knowledgeable as possible and prepared for the twists and turns of a political campaign, and LI smoothed our political road to success, and for that we are most thankful. In the past, the Campaign Management School has been offered 3 times a year, while the Future Candidate School has only been offered once. But as Morton said, we are proud to announce that the Leadership Institute is now offering the Campaign Management School and the Future Candidate School the first full week of every month. To get more information about which training is offered for which month, feel free to visit our website or contact me at tfoot@limail.us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tyler. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Danielle Savoy, who will introduce our outstanding speaker, who is one of my longest-standing friends here in the D.C. area. We are honored to have our speaker. Danielle is our Regional Development Officer for the South and the Midwest region. She's a native of South Louisiana. Danielle received her Juris Doctor and Bachelor of Civil Law from the Louisiana State University Law School. Danielle?
Thank you, Morton. Good morning. The genius of the American founding is the mechanism the founders designed to foster the principle of ordered liberty. And while there may be disagreement among conservatives about the proper balance of order and liberty, most of us recognize the need to unite behind the principles upon which conservatism rests. Our guest speaker's role in that cause is hard to overstate, which makes them uniquely qualified to talk to us this morning about the nature of conservatism and the state of the conservative movement today. Dr. Edwin Feulner works tirelessly to promote and preserve the legacy enshrined by our founding fathers. His work ethic has been praised by none less than William F. Buckley. Since Dr. Feulner took over as president in 1977, the Heritage Foundation has become the tie that binds the conservative movement together as we confront and defeat the incredible challenges that face our nation. Dr. Feulner's leadership has transformed the think tank from a small policy shop into America's powerhouse of conservative ideas. In one of his 7 books, The March of Freedom, Dr. Feulner wrote that a conscious goal of the Heritage Foundation was to become a permanent Washington presence. And they have certainly accomplished this goal. Under Dr. Feulner's leadership, Heritage's presence in Washington has grown from a 9-member staff working out of a rented office on Capitol Hill to a 255-person organization occupying 3 office buildings near the U.S. Capitol today. The milestones of Dr. Feulner's illustrious career are set forth in his bio, but suffice it to say that he is an internationally venerated role model for preserving the conservative ideal and an inspiration to us all. I am proud to present, and you will be happy to hear, the president of the Heritage Foundation, Dr. Edwin Feulner.
Thanks very much, Danielle. That was very, very nice. Rachel, Tyler, congratulations for everything you do here for the Leadership Institute. To my dear longtime friends, Helen and Morton, 35 years or something, we've been laboring in various fields together. Thank you for everything. As you both know, I do consider our 2 organizations very much as not only synergistic, but really sister organizations. And part of the reason for that is that our son's sister, that is our daughter, is a graduate, a very proud graduate of a Leadership Institute training program some years ago. Actually, Barbara, before she went and spent a summer working for Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison of Texas, since we were just talking about Kay and Rick Perry. Leadership Institute just does really, really wonderful work, and I hope afterwards, Morton, you or Helen or someone on the staff will be able to show me the new digs. I love that picture of you holding up the big check and all, and everything you're doing here. It's really wonderful. And thanks to all of you, conservatives, kind of the remnant, to use the Albert J. Nock phrase, because there aren't too many conservatives inside the Capitol Beltway, but we're glad to see all of you here, and particularly glad to see you all early this morning. At the Heritage Foundation, our mission statement is over the front door and in every one of our elevators. We're building an America where freedom, opportunity, prosperity, and civil society flourish. A simple statement, not an easy one in the current or virtually any other political environment, but it's one that we believe in, one that we hope will inspire future generations of conservatives, both at Heritage and around the United States. Little bit of history. Heritage was started by our dear late friend Paul Weyrich, myself. We had the idea, and a guy by the name of Joe Coors had the seed capital, and the three of us got Heritage started, incorporated 72, opened the doors in 1973. We were started with a basic set of principles. Some of you have heard this before. Jerry, sorry about that. You'll hear it again. Basic set of principles. Because Weyrich and I had both been working on Capitol Hill at the time, and we both knew that what members of the House, members of the Senate, and their key staffers needed were short policy papers. Short because not many congressmen or senators have time to read full-length book studies on how to define the correct level of the money supply or whatever. Credible, all the facts up front. If you don't have all the facts up front, you're going to let your allies down and going to give your adversaries, your intellectual adversaries, ammunition to shoot holes in your best arguments. And conclusions, but conclusions separately identified from the facts. Another criteria, in addition to meeting that briefcase test, that is being short and credible, third criteria was timeliness. If a study comes out a day too late and you miss the vote, you might as well not have done it. If it comes out a week too early and nobody's paying attention to it, you missed it again. Well, in many respects, the internet, modern communications enable us to time our publications more precisely now. We're able to target them so that papers on welfare reform go to people who are working on welfare reform, not who are working on reorganizing the military. And of course, underlying all those operating procedures is the basic notion that we are there, and there specifically for us is on Capitol Hill. Walking distance of the United States Senate for our main building, and now for the last year on the House side as well, 227 Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast, just a block away from beyond the Library of Congress, where we're within walking distance of the House and Senate staff and within the range of the bells so that members can make it back in time to cast the critical vote. And casting that critical vote really matters, because every time a vote is cast, freedom either advances or it retreats. Our objective at Heritage is to make sure that it's advancing more than it's retreating. That's what we're committed to, advancing freedom. That's what it's all about. How are we doing it these days? Well, 2007, we have a 23-person board of trustees, meets 3 times a year. And this idea actually came out of a board discussion at an informal dinner the night before our board meeting. One of our trustees said to me, said, "Ed, suppose you were Rip Van Winkle and you fell asleep and you woke up 10 years later what do you want the United States to look like 10 years from now? Instead of going forward one little step at a time, take a big leap ahead and look back and see whether you've actually been moving in the right direction, kind of thing. That little basic idea led us to sit down internally and rethink some of the things we were doing. And we came up with a new internal structure, not of much interest to anybody outside the building, but an internal structure that brings together our communications team and our research team in concentrated, focused efforts on 10 specific broad subject areas. We call them our Leadership for America 10 initiatives. To implement those initiatives, one of the things we knew was we had to be more of a public presence, both in Washington and around the country. That's why we started our cooperative arrangements with Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh. That's why over the last 2.5 years we've grown from 280,000 members around the United States to where we are now more than 700,000 members. 700,000, incidentally, divides into 1,632 per congressional district. Well, some of those congressional districts, Morton can tell you about how politics really works. You know, you got kind of saints you want to reinforce, savables you want to bring your way, and you got the sinners. You just kind of forget those guys. So, you know, we don't worry about having 1,632 members in every district, but I'll tell you, when you've got a 60 or 70% voter, and he's got 5,000 members of the Heritage Foundation in his district, and somehow if you can get them mobilized and get them talking to that congressman about particular issues, they're going to listen. Because chances are 4,000 or 5,000 people are more than are employed by the largest employer in his district, other than the government. So we then said, okay, what are we going to do if we get that many members? How do we activate them? We know, using the old Reagan analogy, that the Heritage Foundation studies enable members to see the light. But what can we do to make them feel the heat? So about 1.5 years ago, we started something called Heritage Action for America, which is a 501c4, so that they can do something we cannot do, that Morton cannot do as a 501c3. And that is, you can go into a congressman, we can right now go into a congressman and say, this is good, bad, and ugly on a particular piece of legislation. But we cannot say, therefore, vote in favor of H.R. 4321 or against S1234. That would be violating the Internal Revenue Code. Well, with this separate organization, Heritage Action for America, we now have a mechanism whereby we can measure whether they are in fact doing that, and we can encourage them to do it the appropriate way. That's also why, just last year, we opened our building on the Pennsylvania Avenue side to be near to the House members, so that there was no excuse for them not being able to come over to our office, our main office building on the Senate side, for fear they'd miss a vote. And that's one of the reasons why virtually every day I'm over at the Pennsylvania Avenue building, and we have meetings going on there constantly with House staffers, with House members, routinely. So as we looked at Leadership for America, we said, you know, what are the big challenges we face? What are those 10 major issues that we're looking at? And they're listed in virtually all of our major publications. American leadership around the world. Yes, America still is an exceptional country. Education reform, making some real progress there. Thank you, Speaker Boehner, for what you did on D.C. school choice this last year. Energy and the environment. Take a look this morning at the front page story on the solar panel company in California that the administration just pumped $500 million into 1.5 years ago, because this was the future of energy development. Company declared bankruptcy. It just laid off 1,100 workers. They're down to 113 workers left. And guess who paid that $500 million to the company? You and me and the rest of us. Enterprise and free markets. What do we do about regulation? How do we make tax policy predictable for the American business community? Big one, entitlements. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Family and religion, getting back to the core set of principles that bring America together. Undergirding that, first principles, going back, as Danielle said so nicely, going back to the first principles in our Constitution. By the way, we've now got 4.5 million copies of the heritage version of the Constitution out in circulation. Somebody asked me last week, what's different about the heritage version of the Constitution? I said the only thing different about it is on the last page there's a little form where you can fill out and send it in and send us a contribution. I said otherwise it's the same Constitution, the same Declaration of Independence that you've come to know and love. But we are very proud of the fact that we have 4.5 million of them out in circulation, including thousands that were just recently distributed at the Iowa State Fair. No surprise that it was Iowa and not Illinois. Or at the Chesterfield County Fair, which happens to be in Eric Cantor's backyard, to remind Brother Cantor where his base of support is and how he should continue to vote. And he's been a very, very good and effective leader, too, I must say. Health care, another one of our priorities. Protect America. I have an op-ed in this morning's Washington Times that I wrote over the weekend about 9/11, 10 years later. We can talk about that during the Q&A if you want to. And finally, again, an undergirding set of principles, and that is something that Professor Gordon Brady and his colleagues believe in very strongly, and that's the rule of law. How do we make sure that it's ensured and that we go on, that it's not a rule by man or rule by arbitrariness? Internally, we said, okay, how are we going to get there as we do this? We did some restructuring again. Stuart Butler, who many of you know, who introduced to the United States ideas like privatization going way back to the 70s. Stuart came to us and said, you know, I'm getting a little tired of administering and running domestic and economic policy studies. He said, I've got an idea. He said, put me in charge of the iPod division of Apple. Let me just go out and think deep thoughts and be creative and not have to be responsible for day-to-day operations. So we set up within Heritage our Center for Policy Innovation. The first product of that is a little study that we did called Saving the American Dream. It was in response to a challenge from the Peterson Foundation. They put out an offer to different think tanks. 5 think tanks accepted or were chosen by the Peterson Foundation to submit plans in terms of what do you do about the deficit, about federal spending, about tax policy. How do you put all those together? John Stossel on Fox News analyzed the 5 responses in mid-June. And we're very pleased to note in our various newsletters, et cetera, that of the 5 alternatives that were put forward, there was only one that received an Emmy, an actual Emmy that John Stossel had won 15 years ago. He gave it to our own Stuart Butler because he said the Heritage Plan's the only one that really comes to grips with all the different issues, pulls them together, talks about it. So let me just talk to you for a minute about Saving the American Dream. You can look at it at heritage.org, or I brought a few copies of the summary along. We talk about entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Baby boomers started retiring 18 months ago. Everybody here knows that. The cash is going out faster now than it's coming in. Dealing with entitlements is not a choice, it's a necessity. We're on the wrong path right now. We've got crushing debt, business-killing regulations, heavy taxes, not liberty and prosperity. And my 3 grandchildren, pictured here, each of whom right now have more than $200,000 mortgages. They're not usually happy when I remind them of this. They were happy here on the 4th of July when we were all together. But they're not happy because there's no house attached to those mortgages. Those are the mortgages that they owe for my wife and my Social Security and Medicare when we get around to retiring. So what the prospects are is that our grandkids are going to be worse off than we are. So what do we do about that? That's what Saving the American Dream's about. We got the budget challenge then of unfunded liabilities that would crush the nation. What we do in there, we talk about how to reform entitlements within a 10-year timeline without raising taxes, by cutting back on government spending, by limiting tax revenue to 18.5% of GDP, which historically is where it has been and where it should continue to be. Federal debt now 70% of GDP, soon going to be 100%. Under our plan, we cut it to 30%. Yeah, it takes 15 or 18 years to get to 30%, but in the meantime, the trend line is moving in the right direction instead of the wrong direction, the way it is now. We reduced the size of the federal government to half of what it is projected to be under current projections. We get the federal government out of deciding where Boeing can build its next set of airplanes. We go back to the 10th Amendment. We say, hey, we'd rather have Chris Christie or Bob McDonnell make decisions than we would Barack Obama and Joe Biden. We talk about a tax policy that's not only lower, but that's predictable. One of our key supporters, a businessman, a developer, had a tough time of it. The business is headquartered in Denver, but he's got rental units around the country. He said, Ed, thanks for what you did last December, at least, in keeping the current tax levels where they are. He said, I guess that's good, because now I've got 23 months in which to make business decisions on a predictable basis. He said, the problem is, in my industry, there's a 7-year payout. What am I going to do for the next 5 years? What's going to happen to me then? He said, do you really think I'm going to invest here? Probably not. Strokes of a keyboard. He said, I can move some of that money offshore. I can go build somewhere else where there is projectable tax rates, projectable government regulation. Part of our long-term plan, change the tax code, a flat tax, instead of, not in addition to a VAT. And with that, roll in the payroll tax, Social Security, Medicare, and you come up with a single tax rate of about 26, 27%. A number of us from different organizations are going to be meeting over at our Pennsylvania Avenue building on Friday at lunchtime to talk about whether this is the time to start reminding the Congress what a total revision of the tax code would be like. Is it going to happen now? No. Nothing's going to happen until 2013 along that line, I don't think. But in the meantime, let's remind them what we stand for, what conservative principles are about. Let's put them out there as real alternatives. Real alternatives that reward savings and encourage positive wealth creation. I mentioned before, protect America and America's interests. National defense is a core responsibility of the federal government. It's in the preamble to the Constitution. We shouldn't forget it. We should really stay focused on it. We do. We don't define it in terms of inputs, X% of the GDP. We define it in terms of outcomes. Is America secure? Are we in a better environment than we were a few years ago? We need the dollars necessary for defense. After 15 years in Iraq, Afghanistan, elsewhere around the world, we're wearing things out. We got to be able to replace them. We can't have not just the B-1 bombers, but also a lot of the fighter planes that are much older than the pilots that are flying them. We need the dollars necessary for defense. We don't need to be in the United Nations, quote, leading from behind. Repeal Obamacare. Get the government out of where we are in healthcare and where we're heading in healthcare. Put individuals back in charge of healthcare. We were talking at our table about the problem when we're away from the rule of law, when we're involved in things like crony capitalism. It is disgusting to wake up in the morning and find out that 5 more corporations or unions or whatever have now gotten a waiver. That's not the way the system's supposed to work. When we talk about the rule of law, we talk about everybody being treated equally under the rule of law. Not equal outcomes, but equal treatment and equal opportunity. Not reliance on czars in Washington. Medicare, total reform. Get rid of the notion that the likes of Bill Gates needs Medicare. Yeah, maybe that means testing. Maybe that means some of us who are way up on the income scale don't need it. More savings, more wealth creation, more self-reliance, back to those basic American virtues. Another part, back to real welfare reform. I don't know if anybody noticed the 1995 welfare reform bill that we were in the center of with our own Robert Rector. Passed the House, passed the Senate twice, vetoed by Clinton both times. Third time around, Clinton decided he better get in front of that one. He signed it. It became the centerpiece of his whole administration on domestic policy. And it worked until Ted Kennedy decided that there would not be a renewal. And so now the numbers have started going in the wrong direction again. Look at our budget chart book on our website, and you'll see how bad the numbers are. We're ready to go with an update. We've got it. It's part of saving the American dream. It's in there. It won't happen again when Harry Reid's in charge of the Senate, but it's there and it's ready to go. It's not going to be easy, but institutionally, organizations like LI that keeps providing the young leaders who we run into all the time on Capitol Hill and around the country for that matter, like Heritage that keeps cranking out the papers year after year. Anecdote, 1983, Bob Michael, House Minority Leader, invited me over to talk about the Heritage Agenda that year. And I talked about tax reform, and I talked about what was going to happen with military spending and what we were recommending. I said, and one of the other things we're going to be working on is Social Security reform, at which point I felt his very heavy hand on the back of my coat. Ed, we do not talk about changing Social Security inside this building. Well, to his credit, 25 years later, George W. Bush had the guts to run around the country and point out what the problems were. He didn't do it very artfully. He didn't build the base the way he should have, but relying on our numbers, on numbers from our good friends at Cato and AEI and Hoover and other organizations, he had the numbers right. And it took that 25 years to get it from, hey, we got to do something about this, to the fact that we are now ready to really tackle that problem. That's one of the reasons, I guess, why institutions are so important. That's one of the reasons why Morton and Helen should be so rightfully proud of the fact that 100,000 people have graduated from their schools now, almost. You're going to have a big celebration with 100,000? I'm sure you will. I suspected as much. Wait till we get to 1 million members. We're going to be doing the same thing. But you need institutions that are around that outlast the politicians. You need to be able to say, hey, whether your name's Bob Michael or Newt Gingrich or John Boehner or Eric Cantor or Paul Ryan or whatever it is, there are places you can go to get the right kind of information. So you need long-term institutions. That's why they're so important. And we need to work harder and smarter than our intellectual adversaries. We have a lot more tools today than we used to have. Whether it's talk radio, whether it's the ability to reach out through the internet directly to people, the younger generation. And I say thanks again to all of you who are here, who work not only with LI, but also work with us at Heritage, because there are a lot of you who support both of our organizations. Because one of the things we believe very strongly in, and I know Morton shares this view, is that to be successful, the conservative movement has to add and multiply, not divide and subtract. We've got to increase the numbers. We've got to convince the younger generation that we've got the right answer. And it's exciting to meet with some young people here with Roman. Where is he? Where's Roman? Back there. And talking about how to get things back under control with your young people in terms of what we should be doing about constitutional changes and how we can work it through at the state capitals as well as on Capitol Hill. That's what I mean by working harder and smarter and looking for those new ideas and finding the institutions to help support them. We can do it. We can pass freedom on to the next generation. But the only way we'll do it is, as Morton makes us do at least once a month, by getting up very early and reinforcing and reinvigorating everything we believe in. Because politics is not a spectator sport. And policy politics, which is what I'm involved in, is different from electoral politics. But that's a different speech. I'll save that for a different time. I just say, again, thanks to all of you for being here. I think we will win, but again, in Washington, there are no permanent victories. Reagan was around. He was terrific. Great things happened. The Berlin Wall came tumbling down. Don't forget the successes we've had. But at the same time, never assume that the other side's standing still. We've got a lot of work to do. I look forward to working with all of you to make it happen. Thanks again for having me here today, Morton. Sure, sure. Thank you, President.
Picking up on your trustee meeting 10 years out, is there comparative tax site? Secondly, what does Eric Cantor do to serve a pro-constitutional intervention?
Well, Eric Cantor has a couple advantages in terms of his position. He's a force multiplier as the majority leader. So we figure we can get to Eric Cantor and make sure that he's on board. We will be more likely to reach others at the same time. Are we making progress? I think so, but it's step by step. And I remind my friends, and you all watch the situation closely enough, you know it. The last election was great in terms of the House of Representatives. We're nonpartisan. We'll work with, in fact, I've got Joe Lieberman coming over to talk about Asia policy next month. Trying to think, we had another, well, anyway, but we are genuinely nonpartisan. If we can find, well, Ron Wyden had a good tax plan when he and Judd Gregg were over talking about it last year. I don't know what's happened to it this year, but we will look for people on both sides of the aisle that we can work with on specific policy issues. Because it's the ideas we're after. It's not the party. Yes. Thought it was the People's Republic of Ireland.
I have to hurry because my pants only last week.
A couple things. First of all, encourage people who've got the guts to stand up and do what you did, Jerry, in terms of actually running for office. Don't just encourage them by writing out a check. That's good, that's necessary, but that's not sufficient. Go down there and help them make calls and watch the polls and all the rest of it. The second thing, work with your state think tanks, because they're at the cutting edge. And I don't know how many of you got this in the mail within the last week or so. It's the reprint of the version of Hayek's Road to Serfdom that appeared originally in the Reader's Digest in 1945. We just sent out 500,000 copies of this to our members. This is a 1944 book, but you read what Hayek said in there about the potential oppression of government, and it's as timely today as it was then. And the reason that's relevant to your question is it's back to first principles again. And Mikulski and what's his name? Van Hollen or whatever. You know, Carden and the rest of those guys are not going to be coming our way. But there are still some good conservatives. The medical doctor over in the Eastern Shore, First District, Andy Harris, great guy. You know, build up the good ones, and even Maryland can come our way.
We have microphones for questions. So.
Oh, somebody over here, back there.
Hold for the microphone, please.
Keith Brailsford from Virginia. I just had a question. The goal you said in returns to the growth of government at the Heritage Foundation was shooting for is basically half of what it's projected to be, I think you indicated. And if you have 4 million workers and you have a 7% growth, and we were looking at, you know, that 280,000 additional workers at the federal level, really our goal should be zero growth and actually turn the trend down.
Yeah. No, we are absolutely projecting turning the trend down. Right now, federal spending is somewhere between 22-23%. Our objective in this 10-year time frame alone, by repealing Obamacare, getting Medicare, Medicaid under control, welfare under control, getting it back down to 18.5%. Are we going to be happy at 18.5%? Hell no. We wanted to get much, much lower than that. But let's do it kind of a step at a time and get this first set of encumbrances out of the way. You're absolutely right, though. To do that, that means some pretty dramatic shifts in terms of the way what government is doing right now. It means cutting it, not expanding it. And not expanding it certainly at the Obama rate, not even expanding it at the George W. rate, which was a great disappointment to all of us. The Department of Education, when I worked for Bob Dole and Jack Kemp and took my one leave of absence from Heritage in 1996, in the Republican platform, we talked about eliminating the Department of Education. Its budget is now $85 billion with a B dollars. $85 billion for something the federal government shouldn't even be doing. I mean, yeah, I'm with you. Right over here.
Bill Fahey, Arlington. The post office has been in the press the entire past week as being broke or more than broke. The average clerk behind the counter at the post office makes $23 an hour. The average clerk behind the counter at Macy's makes $7.83 an hour. Why are we paying 300% salary to our government for doing the same services that the private sector is doing?
Great question, Bill. When I worked for Phil Crane, before the Republican Study Committee, before Heritage, one of the first bills that he introduced when he came into the Congress in 1970 was repeal the private express statutes, those federal laws that say you cannot compete with the post office. Our theory was a good dose of private competition would really make a difference. Well, we're seeing that certainly in terms of packages, in terms of express mail, in terms of electronic delivery of bills and things like that. But the notion that there is now approaching a $10 billion deficit for the U.S. Post Office is, again, it's just staggering. These numbers don't seem to mean anything across the river. One of my colleagues once called it, I work in Disneyland on the Potomac. And that's really kind of what it's like to be over there. And you know, billions aren't even real money anymore. We're now talking about trillions, which are 1,000 billions. Yeah, a lot to do there too. And a good stiff dose of competition would certainly change things around. And yeah, it gets back to patronage. You got to have 6-day delivery of mail. And that 6-day delivery of mail is not only to me in Old Town or you in Montgomery County, it's also to somebody out in the farm in Romney, West Virginia, 35 miles away from the nearest post office. I don't pick on Romney because it's Mitt's name. I pick on Romney because I used to have a farm out there. But, you know, it's a political game, and if we can get the politics out of it, we can make some sense out of it. Okay.
The question I have right now that Heritage your organization's foundation, what they are working with, and the matter most of the people are going to be very scared to talk about, and that's really, really most important time of our time. That's what the economy is linked to it, Islamic terrorism. And as per my conception, until we are going to drive down Islamic terrorism, the economy is not going to come back, and we can't get out from the recession because economy is mostly sentimental. Our corporations are piles of money, and we are not going to invest it. We are scared to go to some other countries to do the business because this is the business for international business. It's not within our country. And it is very important we focus how really root cause of terrorism and how we are going to eliminate this one from the face of the earth. And also why we are not going to approach like slavery. When we go, everybody decided that slavery is something we should stop, no matter what it is, which country is practicing. May not we are practicing, but we will go behind them. The same thing like the Osama bin Laden was telling that if you don't join or not embrace Islam, then we are going to kill you. The 50 countries in this country are telling, if you leave Islam, then we are going to kill you. So what is the difference? This is the two sides of the same coin. And by approaching their people and country and the government, when they're telling that we are going to kill you if you leave Islam, then it's like that, what they are trying to do, they are make all their people, because they said that their people that we are entitled you to kill them. So that means by default, they make every Muslim as a terrorist. That's the most funniest thing, and we are scared to talk about. So through the United Nations, our politician, our conservative politician should approach every candidate in every field of the, like state or federal. They should tell, yes, they should tell that they are against this, and we should propose in United States that this should stop, and there should be equal way we have to deal with. So what's your standpoint as our as organization? Thank you.
There are atrocities being committed in the name of the Almighty in various places around the world. We have done a great deal of work on it. Morton, somewhere along the line, I'd suggest that either Jim Carafano or Jim Phillips be a morning speaker for you to talk about how we can really deal with these programs most effectively. I think to take it up any further today would be kind of unfair, since it's a little bit beyond the scope of my remarks here. We do one more quick one right here in the front. Here's the mic right behind you, Carol.
Carol George. Given that according to the national pollster and political handicapper John Zogby reported after the 2002 election, in every race where Social Security was a major issue, the pro-account candidate won. And given what an unsustainable long-term Social Security is, Do you think pushing Social Security reform in 2012 will draw voters, regardless of party affiliation, left or right, to Social Security reform candidates?
Carol, I think it can if we phrase it right, if we get on message and remind people that I'm going next weekend's our son's 40th birthday. When we had his 30th birthday about 10 years ago, at the birthday dinner, I said, "What are you looking forward to?" And one of the first things he said, "Dad, I'm not looking forward to Social Security because I know it won't be there for me." He said, "I know I'm just going to be paying into it." And that was 10 years ago. I think you're absolutely right, Carol. There are enough people out there now who know what the problems are. They know that this is something that has to be dealt with. It has to be dealt with seriously. And the Nancy Pelosi's of the world who would sweep it under the rug and just condemn people who bring it up, I think are on the short end of it, because I am fundamentally an optimist. I believe, as Ronald Reagan did, and Morton here is a Ronald Reagan alum, trust the people. Give them the facts, and we got lots of ways now to give them the facts that we didn't have 20 years ago, whether it's talk radio, whether it's Fox, whether it's the Washington Times and the Washington Examiner, et cetera, et cetera. Give them the facts. The people will do the right thing. Thanks again, everybody, for having me.
Well, we all are obviously pleased with our effort to come out here bright and early this morning because we had a superb presentation by Dr. Feulner. You can see why he is one of the titans of the conservative movement. Now, Ed, I have to tell you, and frequent participants here will know, that our tradition is to present Adam Smith material to our speakers. The gentlemen get an Adam Smith necktie, and I see some of them around. Ladies get the Adam Smith scarf. And as one of the key leaders of the Mont Pelerin Society and the Philadelphia Society, you are no stranger to Adam Smith ties. But I have noticed that the Heritage Foundation produces ties, and you all, you staffers and you yourself, seen so frequently with Adam Smith ties. So rather than an Adam Smith tie, I'll present something that I know you can wear, and that is a very nice pair of Adam Smith cufflinks.
All right, all right. Really neat. Thank you, Morton. I will indeed. Thank you. Thanks very, very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. I do have someone I want to bring up here to make an announcement. His name is Darren Iwicki. He is the state programs manager at the Americans for Prosperity Foundation. Darren works closely with all 33 state Americans for Prosperity chapters to put on events and engage citizens in the name of limited government and free markets at the local, state, and federal levels. Before taking his current post at Americans for Prosperity, Darren was a youth leadership school coordinator here at the Leadership Institute, and Darren's going to announce a joint project between the Leadership Institute and Americans for Prosperity Foundation. Darren, welcome back.
Morton, thank you. I don't think we've ever done this before, announcing our Defending American Dream Summit at a Leadership Institute breakfast, but besides the fact that this is the 5th annual, I'm more excited about the fact that Americans for Prosperity Foundation and the Leadership Institute have finally joined arms and are creating an online training between Americans for Prosperity Foundation to help train our 1.8 million activists and those here at the Leadership Institute through the due diligence of Patty Simpson and her great team that she's been helping us out here. We just filmed 4 trainings online. Thank you to Morton and the great LI Studios. If you haven't had a chance to see LI Studios revamped, I encourage you to go up there and take a look at it. It is absolutely phenomenal what they've done even since I've left in the short period. It seems like I can't get away from you guys here at LI, but it's because you do such great work at the Leadership Institute. And I can't tell you everywhere we go with Americans for Prosperity, Morton, I have to tell you, my credibility is because I worked with the Leadership Institute. And so every time I say, what did you do before? I said, well, I worked for the Leadership Institute. And they said, oh, Morton Blackwell, very good, very good. So my ignorance as a young individual quickly goes away with those, unless I talk to the left, and yet I'm still ignorant and naive for thinking the way I do. But that's okay. That's okay. But we're going to pass out some palm cards for our 5th annual Defending American Dream Summit. We'll be launching our online training with Morton and his staff here at our Defending American Dream Summit. And I actually have a special discount offer for all of you who attend the breakfast here at the Leadership Institute. If you type in LI Breakfast, that's LI Breakfast at when you go to register, you'll get 20% off of our Defending American Dream Summit. And I wish I could do more, but we have to have a little skin in the game for you. But we already had one presidential candidate announce. I can't tell you who it is yet because we haven't officially announced, but I'll let you know. We've had one. I'm sure we'll have all of them come on out, and so it'll be very exciting. I hope you can join us. And again, I'm really looking forward to the launch and the joint effort. Thank you to Morton, his staff, and those at Americans for Prosperity. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Darren. I invite you all, if you are interested in Adam Smith materials, it's available from my assistant, Kathy Graham, who is in Texas now, and subbing for her at her desk up in the 5th floor is Harold Breivik, and if you want Adam Smith attire, you can go up immediately afterwards, and he has a wide variety for you. I invite you to join us on Wednesday, October 5th for our next Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. Our guest speaker will be Congressman Tim Hulskamp of Kansas. And shortly after the event, if you are interested in a tour of the full Leadership Institute facilities, please gather up here. Seth Nichols will take you on a tour, stem to stern, of all the things that we have here, and you can see where we achieve what our donors make possible. And there's a lot new to see, including the addition next door, to which I will take Dr. Feulner as soon as we leave this room. Again, thank you for coming.